Okay, meeting is recording. Okay, so we have opened the meeting of the regular meeting of the Board of Finance on Tuesday, the 16th at about 7:31. Again, I'd ask non-members of the Board of Finance to please mute your computers. So we can get through our meeting, or I will mute everybody once we take roll. So let me start with taking roll of the members of the Board of Finance, please. Jay Birnblum. Thank you. Present. I heard. Grub Garvin.
Present.
David Kelsey. David Kelsey. I heard that present. Okay. Anna Reeder. Anna. Did anybody hear Anna reply? I don't see her.
I just joined, so if I just roll call.
Sorry.
David Kelsey, I just joined if I missed roll call.
Okay.
There's a lot of feedback from somebody's computer.
Again, as soon as we get going, I'm going to mute everybody, but whoever's speaking.
Okay.
No, I can't tell who it is.
So there's no Anna, correct? Everybody
Not as of
for
yet.
regular.
Very difficult to hear. I'm looking at the names down the right side to see if she's there.
I think Michelle might be the culprit if you want to try muting hers.
I muted my phone, and Chelsea muted my computer, so it's not me. When I'm not talking, I'm muting my phone.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Adam Burrows.
Here.
Thank you. Matt Olson.
Present.
Thank you. And Matt. Jude Reed.
Here.
Saw Jude there. You still here, Jude?
I am.
Okay, great. All right. Thank you. So, and Janet Sturgis is not present. She informed me she would not be here, and she requested that Jude Reed sit in for her tonight. So thank you all for being here. I know we have some non-Board of Finance members here, and I will get right to the first item on the agenda, which is a WPCA reallocation of carryover funds.
Go forward. Is Anna?
BJ, yeah, I had trouble hearing you, but you're correct. It's not reported in as of yet, so would you care to make a motion?
I would make a motion to seat Adam Burrows in her place.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
The second was Jude?
Yep.
Thank you. Please identify yourself just so we have it for the record. Sometimes it's tough to hear, so I appreciate that.
Got it.
So motion's been made by BJ to seat Adam for Anna tonight, and it was seconded by Jude Reed. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Thank you, BJ, for catching that for me. All right. So we will get going with Rich Pendergrass from the WPCA, and I agreed to share his document with you all on the screen. I've got to get to it. I've got to open it. I apologize for not having that done prior to this. But during this presentation, I'd like everybody's microphones to be muted just so we can get through it. And then members of the Board of Finance will be able to ask questions at the end. I would also like to recommend 2 additions to the agenda. Down under other business, I'd like to add an action item for White Sands Beach pumps, and Mr. Griswold will, this is an old topic that we'll bring back to the table. And then I will also, after Selectmen's Report, which is item number 8 on our agenda, like to ask for a motion to insert public comment at that point in the meeting, in case there are members of the public that have comments about the items we're dealing with at tonight's meeting. So I entertain a motion to add those 2 items to the agenda.
So moved. Kelsey?
Mr. Kelsey, thank you. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Second, was that Adam?
Yes.
All right, Adam, thank you. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Let me get back to the meeting. And I am going to share, I hope, the screen. And I am going to turn it over to Rich. Can everybody see the coastal wastewater sewer project on their screen? Okay, great. All right. Take it away, Rich.
Okay, thank you, Board of Finance, for letting me speak. And I have 13 slides. The first slide and the last slide don't count. The first slide. So it shouldn't take too long, and we'll go through. And I tried to capture in the right amount of detail your questions that were asked previously, as well as the project where it is now, and the discussion that triggered this request. And as Andy said, at the end of this, we can have questions. We can go back to a particular slide if you like. So you can go to the next slide, Andy. So the agenda is Soundview and Miscellaneous Area B sewer project, some needed agreements, some timing, questions that are asked, simple pro forma, which is estimate of the timing and the costs, and then open questions. So Andy. So I'm going to kind of just go over this. There's a summary for need of sewers. This is a slide that we presented to our question and answer session to the general public, and it's up on the website. I'm going to skip this, and just you can read it at your own leisure if you'd like some other time, or if you have questions, you can ask me later. Go on, Andy. So a little bit of a reminder about the referendum in 2019. 883 yes versus 565 no votes. A very good turnout, I believe. The details in this resolution allow the town to build a sewer system for this with an amount of 9.5 million. That is the cost that we go for the entire project. However, with grants and so forth, we'll see that it's estimated to be 7.44 million. It includes all the things that we're doing at current status. It's not as if that the referendum was passed last year and we need to amend it or change it or do anything differently. And I guess that's my key takeaway from this slide. You can go on to the next slide, Andy. So the general timing of this, we see what we call the agreement to join the cost sharing agreements. This is with the private beach associations to share the cost of shared resources. This is what we'll be talking about a lot tonight. And the timing of that is we need it now. That is basically kind of holding us up. And this allows us to trigger to do some additional things in order to get the project going. The cost sharing agreements, the CSA I'm using for short, also helps us sign intermunicipal agreements with East Lyme and New London, which is also needed. With those 3 items, CSA, IMA for East Lyme, IMA for New London, we can then finish our application for clean water funding and start our project. That'll become more important when we talk about how much the town has to float as far as the amount of money they have to expend until they start getting reimbursements. You can see how we have we hope to resolve those by August. I don't mean resolve the cost sharing agreement by August. I mean the IMAs by August, but the CSA comes before the IMAs. submit our application with a letter of funding in September. That assumes that we have everything signed off and ready. We have submitted an application already. Of course, it's incomplete, but we did that as a placeholder in order to secure our spot. Let's see, the design of the collection pipes and the pump station. We think the design will take about 11 months to do. The pump station will take longer, but as far as the design part will go. Construction of the pump and collection of force main. I have a question mark after this. In 2021, I don't believe that this is possible, but it is an estimate that was given. I think it's just an old estimate. The real estimate is 2024 to have it completed. At that time, we'll refresh the cost of the whole project, and then that allows us to know the actual costs and refresh the benefit assessments and send that out in the 6-month period before the finishing of the project. And so the timing of the benefit assessment recovery of costs come in, and the timing of paying for the long-term loan start happening 6 months after that. We go to the next slide, Andy. So the next 2 slides are some questions that were asked. I'm going to kind of read them out and explain what are the details for the agreement to join the cost sharing agreement buy-in fee. It's an agreement between the town and the private beach associations to share common sewer infrastructure and a portion of the prorated legal and administration fees. So we all use one pump station, and we use some collector pipes that used from the private beach associations and the Soundview neighborhood to collect. That is different than the collection pipes that we use in Soundview that the private beach associations have no involvement with. It's the shared resources, as well as the forced main, the main pipe that leads the pump station out of Old Lyme on its way towards New London. The initial buy-in fee is $66,609. That is what we have an agreement being negotiated. That's for the last 7 or so years that the private beach associations have used in designing the pump station, getting it approved, and the legal fees to do not the legal fees, it's legal fees to design and form the agreements, but it also includes the engineering to do the pump station and site the pump station. This also obligates us, when we sign this agreement, and the private beach associations to share the resources and the costs. And this also obligates us to $1.994 million. So it's $1.994 million over a 20-year period at 2% financing. Now, by the time I wrote this presentation, we had some other outstanding costs that were not yet forecasted, and I got them, I think, yesterday, and that's for an additional $30,000 for the land to lease the pump station, as well as 2 private owners' leases or easements. So by using these private owner easements, we save money instead of building a system to go around those private properties. That money is not included in this, and it's not forecasted in this because we're not sure when that will be required to be paid. It'll be either sometime next year, which we can cover, or at the end of the project, which is the current plan, which is by 2024.
That's fine.
The next question, if you can go back to the...
Yeah, there you go. I think
Okay,
I'm back
you go.
there. Sorry.
All right, good. Is your budget request for 2021 in line with your needs right now? And the answer is yes. Barring any unforeseen circumstances that we're not aware of, it's in line. It's a tight budget, but it is in line with what we need. We don't need to amend it. Question number 3. What is the plan for billing the users going forward? You said twice per year. How many bills there will be needed to be sent out? What sort of staffing needs and needed with this, and when does it start? We don't think we have the staff that can absorb this right now. So what we're going to be needing is 2 billing periods per year, the same time the property tax goes out to approximately 236 residents. Some residents own multiple properties. And we either use the existing town billing infrastructure, and I understand that that's not a good idea, so we can hire a payroll type service. Now, those 2 billing periods would be 3 bills. 2 for the capital recovery, which is the long-term 20-year loan, and 1 for the sewer user fee. And those are the 3 that would be used for. You can go to the next slide, please, Andy. Question 4, as we go through the next 20 years, the bond being paid down, how much of the town of Old Lyme is going to have to float until we are paid in full? So the initial float is $66,609, which is the cost to join the agreement to join the cost sharing, plus a small amount of legal fees, which we have to do to sign the agreement. I don't have an estimate for that, but I don't think it's going to be more than a couple $1,000s. It's essentially our lawyer looking over the contract and helping us negotiate, which is pretty much done, but I haven't got the bill yet. As well as the IMAs, having them amend and getting the bill for that. So this will be a short-term loan from the WPCA, and you can see the pro forma in the coming slides to explain that. So we're making this payment out because this is a requirement to get clean water funding. Once we get clean water funding, I'll explain the process will be the bill to the state of Connecticut. They send us money. We then pay contractors. And I'll be repeating that a couple times tonight. Question 5, who's going to manage the operation of the pump station related to infrastructure, and what will the cost on an annual basis be? So the pump station is going to be managed by what I call a maintenance repair organization. These are service organizations that specialize in this. We're not hiring someone to be on the town staff. They would sit there and twiddle their thumbs most of the time. It's much more efficient to have a company like this. We're planning or probably going to use the same company that East Lyme uses. That way they can manage the whole system. There's no finger pointing, and it's probably more efficient because we know what they're, we will be able to find out, negotiate a good price. The capital costs, this, and maybe it's a little confused on the question. The capital costs are significant, and it's in the pro forma, and it's the buy-in fees for the equipment over a 20-year period. The annual operation costs are estimated at this point, and I have them in the pro forma, and I can explain that detail if someone wants to know that. The costs are similar as far as it goes, and it also depends on the estimated volume. So there's some variability on this, but we're estimating the worst case scenario in this, the most expensive, highest volume for our estimate. You can go to the next slide, please. So when we requested the using to sign the agreement to join the cost sharing agreement, we are planning on using the 2018-19 legal carryover, and you can see these items in here. 2018-19 consulting, 2019-2020 legal to finish it up, and 2019-2020 consulting. That would get us to $66,609. Use up these carryovers that we've been holding for years while we've been negotiating this contract. And it leaves us with some money in order to do legal for the rest of the year. Go to the next slide, please. So, chance to look at this slide before. I'll try to break this down, and it can be confusing to some, I guess. And I'm not a financial analyst. So, what I'd like to explain is the cost side of it. The green highlighted columns are key variables that are used from estimates that I get from different places. And then I equate those variables over the time period that they're supposed to be either spent or paid or something like that. 615,200 is the design part. We think that's going to be over 11 months. So these are periods of 6 months, each column. The first part, the 66,609, that's the agreement to join the cost sharing agreement. And you have seen that the second two columns are the design part split over 2 years, well, over 11 months. Again, after we get the cost sharing agreement and the IMA settled, we get a bill from the design team. We've done some design, we've figured out where the pipes are going to go in the street, so forth. We get that bill, we submit it to the state of Connecticut, they turn around, they pay us, and we turn around and pay the contractor. So we're not floating $300,000, $400,000 each year to do this, or each 6 months. We're accruing debt because we're taking basically a reimbursement from the state of Connecticut, the deep clean water funds. And as that goes through this process, I'll explain how it gets converted and how the grants work. So probably best I go and explain the grants in the next slide. If you can go to the next slide. So the first phase was the cost sharing agreement. The second phase is the design. The third phase is the construction. So now we're constructing the collection pipes for the Sound View sewer project. And we expect that to be over 3 years. And we have an estimate for that of 2.5 million. We also have this broken down between the cost and then the interest. Now, this is also getting reimbursed from the state. So as we get the bills, we send them to the state of Connecticut. They turn around and send us reimbursement. We turn around and give it to the contractor. We're not carrying or floating any money at this point, but we are accruing debt. And that debt goes for the whole design part and construction part is what I would call a short-term loan. Later, that short-term loan turns into what's called a permanent loan obligation. The long-term, 20 years at 2% interest. We're accruing interest all along on this. And when we get to that PLO, it turns around and deducts the amount of grants that we're going to get. And what's left over from the grants, that's how much money that we'll owe long-term. The grants are 25% of what's applicable. What's applicable is capital, equipment, that kind of thing, easements, but not all legal. And what we end up doing is we submit our application, and their application, they come back with a letter determining what's eligible and what's not, line items. We've already done this when we did the initial wastewater plan, where that was eligible, and they sent us an eligibility letter that said, here's how much you get back, here's how much grants, and so forth. Let's see. Okay, I've covered that. Next slide, please. So this is kind of the transition year, going to what's known as the permanent loan obligation. In 2024, we would have a refresh of all the costs. At this point, all the estimates are now, we have actual costs. With those actual costs, we're able to refresh the benefit assessment. The benefit assessment, how much we assess to each homeowner for the improvement of their property by installing sewers. That assessment then goes out to the residents 6 months before the project ends. And the project ends, now we start up with having to pay back 6 months after, so a total of 12 months after the permanent loan obligation, which is what we use to pay for the design and construction and the agreement to join the cost sharing agreement. I have it separated here as the permanent loan obligation for that. What's not included in that, but it's kind of the same, is the cost sharing agreement buy-in, the capital for that, because that might be handled through the Private Beach Association's clean water funds. What's also not included is the buy-in for the IMAs for East Lyme and New London. Now, it's not included in our permanent loan obligation, but it's the same financing over 20 years because they used the state's clean water funding to get that, and they have to extend the same benefits to us. It's already in the existing contracts. Let's see if I covered everything here. So the thing about this is that this is kind of a transition year. We finished the project. The project has to be forecasted when it starts and finished. I'm told the projects always seem to finish late. The idea is that we have that timing estimated pretty good, so we have the project finished, so we have basically plan everything that we have to do in order to be ready for it. Okay, and go to, and I think that's the 2 more slides. So this is the basically the last slide that counts. So the benefit assessment ends up paying off the permanent loan obligation. There's annual sewer user fees that's going to be adjusted, and that's for the processing and the rainy day fund to replace equipment as it ages. If it takes 20 years to pay this loan off, it's 30 years for the equipment to last. The reserve on the bottom line is just a number that showed up. We will have to come up with some financial advice on how much to reserve. And we'll adjust accordingly based on that, based on the benefit assessment and the user fees and our costs. And then this continues until 2044 when the 20-year paybacks are completed. And at that point, it's probably switching to, maintenance of the system. So that concludes, you go to the next slide, and I think it just says questions.
It'll let me go down there. There we go. You got it.
Yeah, the last slide that's easiest won't go to it. So I thank you for letting me speak. And I guess now if there's any questions, I'd be happy to try and answer them.
And I'd ask that those questions be limited to members of the Board of Finance at this point. So are there any members of the Board of Finance that have questions for Rich?
It's Dave Kelsey. I have a single question just so we're clear on what we're being asked to do tonight. And I think overall we've got a lot more detail than we have in the past. That's good. But I think that it begs a lot of questions for longer term presentations and that sort of thing. But my understanding is that we're being asked to approve $66,609, which is basically some carryover that we typically approve in August, as well as some operating income that actually there's no operating income from 2020 to 2021 here. Is that right? Are we just being asked to approve the 66,609 or?
Yeah, that money sits, as Rich pointed out, in different buckets within the WPCA, items that were budgeted. We're looking to shift it into a single bucket that can be used for other uses than it was initially intended.
Well, if I could clarify, I'm not sure if it was different intended. Both this 66,000 is legal and consulting.
Right.
But I felt it was important to ask Andy advice on how to proceed, and that's why we're here. It's a big number. We don't normally spend this kind of much money, and it starts off a big trigger. So we wanted to have this opportunity to have any discussions that there might be.
So Rich, just with this screen up, you can see that we have in carryover the 22.7 for legal, 22.7 and 5,600. So that's about $1,000. Is it basically you may need to spend more than that on legal? So we're taking money we're lumping the consulting money, the 15 and the 23.3, along with the legal funds to put it in one bucket for spending on buying into with the other beach associations, our fee of about 66.6, correct?
Yes, and the mix of so it's one check to one entity, right. But it's for different things, and this is all reimbursable through clean water funds, which We just need to complete it first in order to submit our application. It's kind of like you have to have the agreements in place. If that makes any sense.
So this is not new money. This is money that's been budgeted both this current year as well as past years that is budgeted for WPCA use. I don't like people to move money from one column to another. And so to keep the Board of Finance and our auditors happy, this is the right thing to do.
Okay.
Uh,
I didn't want to do it without having consulting you.
Well,
Rich, this is Doug Wilkinson. Can I interject?
sure, go ahead.
He is
Doug.
the vice chair. He is our treasurer for the WPCA, in case you're not worried.
Sure.
No.
Go ahead, Doug.
Just so you know, I went through all of the invoices that make up 66,000 from the Private Beach Association. They go back 3 or 4 years. I looked at each one to assure myself that they pertained to the shared resource. And the split of the money that we're asking to spend is exactly the consulting share and the legal share of those invoices. So we're really not moving money from bucket to bucket.
Okay.
Yeah, we are asking you to combine it into one payment. But the 66.6 is made up of a legal amount and a consulting amount
Mhm.
adds up to the 66.6 by category. So we're really not moving money from one place to another. We're just paying it. I don't know if that helps or not, but
I think it does. It helps me. Other questions, Matt? Or you?
Yeah, this is Matt. I had a question specifically as I looked at the document, and maybe I misunderstood it. Are we, when we pay the $66,609, are we committing ourselves to a $1.9 million obligation? In other words, it looked like potentially when you enter the cost share agreement, you take on an obligation. So if there's a change in plans, what options do we have to back out? Maybe I misinterpreted the slide. Could one of you explain that to me?
Okay, it does obligate us and obligates the private beach associations to continue on. However, there is a termination clause in every contract, and the termination clause in this contract is that we would both in writing say we're going to terminate and sever our agreement. We are supposed to pay all the fees up until that point. That 1.9 is to build the pump station. So we either pay that or we build our own pump station. I don't know if that explains it, but we're obligated to continue on, but we would have to terminate and we'd have to pay what was expensed that time that we terminate. So if you want to terminate quick. That way you don't have to pay.
Andy?
Does that answer your question, Matt?
Yeah, I think it does. Thank you.
Anybody else on the Board of Finance?
This is BJ, two things. One, writer's face on the screen, and suggest that that we want to put Anna back in as a voting member of the board tonight. Does that make sense?
So Anna has arrived at the meeting, so she would, Adam was sitting in for her in her short absence. So I don't know that we need to take a vote on that, but it would just be that, to your point, that Anna would be the voting member tonight to take her seat.
And my question for Rich, which I'll ask now, and you may want to answer it now or at a different time. We were, the Board of Finance, copying on a letter from a lawyer representing the Soundview Sewer Coalition to you. Basically challenging the question whether the increase in the fair market value of the properties are going to equal or exceed the benefit assessments, and obviously taking the position that no, they won't. So can you just summarize for us the status of the WPCA's dealing with that issue?
Okay, great question. Just to kind of add a little flavor to it and background, at least my opinion, and then I'll get to exact the answer I think you're looking for. We knew this was going to happen. We suspected this was going to happen. The statute is clear that you can only charge the value of the property improvement. The question is, what is that improvement of the property? And generally what it comes down to is a method of evaluating the property improvement pursuers, and they have their they have hired an assessor, and the assessor, if you've read the report, has determined that the value is going to increase 7% for residential properties, 10% for commercial properties. And the value of that seems to me is very beneficial for them. And we have also an assessor, appraiser, that's an expert in specifically sewering. And he has represented a number of cases along up and down the Connecticut coast and in the interior of Connecticut. He has started to do a report, draft reports on the assessed values. So we have not yet got that assessed value. And the scenario here that I think maybe you're alluding to, if not, I'll explain it that so everyone understands. We have this project and we have this cost and we set the assessment up. If we are to lose in court individually on each property, and the judge would say, we don't think the property value is going to increase that much, the town would be still liable for the debt. So the town would still be paying for this amount of the project. We believe that the amount that we're estimating is somewhere in the neighborhood of 12 to 15% per property. We believe that is fair and reasonable and within the limits of the law. I would point out maybe some holes in their appraiser. One is that he's estimating that the value of adding sewers is less expensive than replacing a septic system. And that's just a red flag right there. It also points out that his math saying that because the properties in Point of Woods improved in value, we're going to take their increase times the increase of Sound View, multiply them together, and that's how you get the increase in value. I'm not an appraiser, but that doesn't sound logical to me at all, because you're using comparative analysis. And I would point out that Point of Woods, when they did a study, they felt that their average property increases was $50,000 per property. And that was, I don't know how many years ago, 10, 15 years ago. So we're preparing for this using an expert and refreshing the benefit assessment to have the total cost. I'm very hopeful that using the cost sharing agreement will help us lower the cost of the whole project. And that's what we've been working so hard for. And it may all come to the point where the costs are low enough where it's acceptable. Probably there's certain people that will never like it. But I hope that answers your question.
It does. Thank you, Rich.
Other questions from members of the Board of Finance?
Andy, it's Jude.
Yep.
I have a question on this slide where it says legal remaining for 2019-20. This is the year we're in, and Dave Kelsey made a comment that we would usually do our carryovers in August. Is this going to be carried over, or is this part of tonight's conversation?
I think the legal remaining that remains to that 23,628. I think that'll be something we'll deal with in August.
Okay.
If the WPCA needs that in addition to their thing for 2021 for some specific reason. You heard earlier, one of the questions that was asked, and Rich certainly jump in. I don't know why I can't move the page up now. There we go. Question 2 was, is your budget request for next year in line with your real needs?
And we believe it is. You know, the timing of these projects, I don't know if the first selectman's on, but he's been involved in negotiating with the private beach associations. We've been working on this for a couple of years, and You would think this would have been resolved. We would have had the agreement ready, and it seems to take forever. So we forecast it and say, well, this won't take long. It'll take a couple of months, you know, and then it's a year later, 2 years later.
Legal remaining as of today, 3,628.
I believe that's what will be after we use up the $5,600 dollars. So it's probably more than that than today. But maybe if you really need a number, I'm sure Doug can look it up and figure it out for you.
No, I was just curious if that was going to be an ask in addition to the 66,609.
The idea is that we'll, you know, I don't want to say we need it now because we have a process where I actually ask Doug to do it. I look at it and the vice chair look at it.
Okay.
And then we formally request. And usually Andy tells me, you know, this is a deadline. You have to have these requests by a certain time. So.
Okay, that answers it.
We always don't, we try not to spend if we don't have to.
My concern is with conversations about suing, will we have enough legal money?
Well, the suing probably, well, here's a timeline for you. I don't think it would very much help anyone suing now because we haven't assessed anyone. So they'd have to wait to 2024 to sue us.
Okay.
In which case we'll have a better handle on everything that's the cost will be. So, you know, for them to sue now is, you know, it's just, it seems inappropriate.
Okay. Thank you.
Andy, it's Dave Kelsey. I've just got two quick questions. Rich, I only had one until your last comment. So are you saying that we're not going to evaluate the benefit improvement to properties until 2024?
No, I'm saying we're working with a consultant now. That consultant has a contract to evaluate and advise us on our formula, which is evaluating samples of properties, you know, small, medium, large, weird, strange, which we have. He also in the contract is to represent us should we get sued.
When is that? Because that's where the rubber meets the road, I think, for the people right now who have concerns. When is the WPCA planning to come out with property by property increase in value for the project? Do you have a timeline for that or no?
We did that already in order to plan for the referendum, and we have a method, but we think we can improve the method. So we're currently debating the improved method, and we're going to work with the consultant to get his advice. But the real process is we don't have to have it ready until 2024 when the whole project, when the construction ends, we have to be ready and go with that. So it's probably going to be 6 months to maybe 12 months before the construction ends. We'll tune it up.
So just a quick comment and then a second question. I don't want to monopolize. You're waiting, you're going to do a $9.5 million project and then surprise people with whether there's a lawsuit or not. If it can be done sooner, I would recommend it. That's just a comment.
Well, we've done it already.
It feels like you did it. Then we had the referendum. Now now folks have changed their mind. And now you're saying it might be 2024 before we give people the information that's either going to upset them or not upset them. And I would just recommend if we can truncate that process, it would be helpful to the folks in Sound View. I mean, and for the town as well, because if they're successful and they're successful to the tune of $1 million and everyone voted for $9.5 million, let's put the clean water sharing aside. Let's call it what it is. It's $9.5 million. And all of a sudden the rest of the townspeople are faced with $1 million that they didn't know about in 2024. That's not going to feel too good. So bottom line is, if we can truncate that process, my personal opinion is that would be a good thing. My second question is, in terms of the cost sharing, which is a big piece of the puzzle, how was the cost sharing arrived at in terms of the proportions for the Soundview area and miscellaneous area B compared to the other three beaches?
Okay, so the first thing, the truncate, we're happy to release. We have already. It's been in the public papers, the assessment. But I want to clarify. The idea is the formula exists, and should the cost be 7.44 million or 5 million, we put that cost in there, and then it automatically refreshes the cost. We don't anticipate the cost to go up. We anticipate the cost to go down. So the residents know the worst case scenario now, and it should go from there lower. The second question you had, the proportions of the EDU. Well, essentially, it was the ultimate is agreeing to a percent ownership. That percent ownership was arrived at by debating back and forth, but eventually we decided to use the initial engineering reports, which equates to the volume of each project area. And the volume is based on what's called equivalent dwelling units from the initial engineering report. And equivalent dwelling units are taking an average house and then adjusting for the population that's there for smaller houses and larger houses and commercial properties. So how they use. So an example is a tiny house will have less of an EDU, and a commercial building with a restaurant with the number of seats would have a certain amount of EDUs. And those EDUs together are compared to the private beach association's same type of method, but a different engineering company that did it. Both engineering companies looking at each other, looking at their formulas and saying, okay, here's how much we have, here's how much you have. We ended up getting 270 EDUs, and all the other EDUs combined with the private beach associations was, I believe, 909 EDUs total, which equates to a 29.7% ownership. I hope that answers your question. If not, I'm happy to try.
Yeah, but just to simplify, so you took the estimated volumes from 4 areas, and that's the denominator, right? You add up all the volumes, and then the estimated volume for Soundview is the numerator to determine what our cost sharing proportion would be. Is that right or no?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Yep.
Other questions from members of the Board of Finance?
Andy, Tim Grizzle, if I'm looking at the carryover report, and I see number 88, WPCA Legal has a remaining balance of 17,889, but on page 8 there, the carryover amount coming from that line supposedly is 22,707. Subject to Nicole reviewing it, that may be 4,818 high. Therefore, we probably have to go down to the 2020 legal budget and take money out of that to make it work.
Got it.
That
Do you concur? Nicole, I know you're on the call with us. Do you?
If it's all going to go into a pot of money, we can just move the dollars around. But I think there's only 17,889 remaining in the carryover line, not 22,707.
when we did this presentation, there was. So I have a current update of what's going on, and I'm not sure
Excuse me,
maybe something has been charged to.
Doug, I don't know what numbers you're looking at, but I have a report from May 31st with the carryover for WPCA legal 25,429. I'm sorry, I'm reading the wrong line. You're right. 17,8. Yeah, so we would need to take a little more out of the 2020 budget.
On the 2020 legal, you can increase that.
Yeah, and we can do that. We have that in the budget.
Just want to be sure.
Okay, so the number we're looking at is really monies from carryover legal 2018, 2019, carryover legal 2018, I'm sorry, consulting carryover 2018, 2019, the 15, plus the current year legal, but we're going to need to take a little bit more out of the current year legal to get to the 66,609.
Yep.
67,000. Around it to 67,000. Do I hear a motion? Well, I'm more so, yeah, it was more so to Nicole.
Oh, okay.
I'm not sure if Nicole's still on the call or not.
But can you hear me?
I can now. I'm gonna
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, I would just round it to 67,000. And again, even as we sit now, some of these carryover line items have been hit with other WPCA bills that came in, like from Sisman Shapiro. So I wouldn't be so concerned about what amount is coming from what pot. I will use all the carryover I can first, and then whatever I need, I will go to their regular budget.
Okay. So your recommendation is 67,000.
I would do 67,000, just make it easy.
In line with the agenda item, do I hear for reallocation of carryover of $67,000 along with current budget items for WPCA? Anybody?
I'll move that.
Mr. Garvin, and then Anna was the second. Further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Okay. That motion carries. Rich and WPCA, thank you very much for your work, and I know there's a lot of work still to come.
You're welcome. Thanks for your support.
You're welcome. All right. Next item on the agenda is to consider moving the proceeds from the sale of the 2 fire trucks, approximately $80,000, to be moved into the Old Fire Department Equipment Fund.
Equipment or apparatus?
Apparatus, I'm sorry. So Tim, that was 80,000 exact for those 2 trucks?
I believe so. Is that correct, Nicole?
No, I believe it was 80,300.
Okay.
300.
80,300 to the apparatus account.
I'll move that, Andy.
I'll second.
Second, moved by Mr. Kelsey, seconded by Ms. Reed. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Motion carries. Okay. Allocating the Haynes Park Boathouse remaining balance to be used for the Haynes Park bathroom building. You want to run through this at all?
How much is it, Andy?
$32,000.
It's 31,675. That's been sitting there for over a year. Everything as planned is been spent out of there. And now that they're doing the bathrooms, there's concern that they might not have enough. And so they requested that this amount get reallocated to the bathroom project at Haynes Park.
I'll make that motion.
Reed, do I hear a second?
TJ.
I'm sorry, who was the second?
Second, Anna.
BJ.
Thank you. Anna with the second. Any?
31,600. Is that 31,675?
That's correct.
Okay,
That's
thank
what's
you.
remaining in the fund. Any discussion?
Andy, if I might?
Yep.
Phil Parkak has been leading the committee to go out to bid. The bids are expected back July 1, so we do not know exactly what the bids will show. But the building has a budget of $150,000. I believe actually there's about 5,000 roughly that was used for the well, trying to see if the well would produce more proper water and so forth. And ultimately, the decision was to not drill a new well and come up with a dry hole, but to create storage tanks in a crawl space, 800 gallons worth of storage. So the machinery and the extra work to create the crawl space certainly was not contemplated to be part of the building at 150,000. This was something that was a subsequent requirement based on the well not having a very good output. We don't know exactly what the tanks and the various and the crawl space will be as a component, but we're pretty sure that the 150 will be okay for the base building. But when you add in what's been spent and what needs to be spent for this water storage and so forth, that this 31,000 and change would be important to have available. Once the bids are opened in July, we'll know for sure what the amount will be from the builder. But since it's in the boathouse fund, we were just asking that this be carried over and be available for this water storage and crawl space additional work that wasn't contemplated.
Great. Thanks, Tim. Any questions for Tim? So we have a motion and a second for the 31,675 to be used for the Haynes Park bathroom coming from the Haynes Park Boathouse Fund into the bathroom building. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. All right, now we get to fun part, approval of minutes. We've got 3 sets of minutes. Starting with March 17th.
Oh, yeah.
Anybody have any comments or corrections?
I had none on those.
Somebody care to make a motion to accept the minutes from March 17th?
Garvin.
Mr. Garvin? And who was the second? Anybody have a second for me, please, on the minutes?
I can't. I was absent.
I was absent.
BJ.
BJ? Okay, thank you.
Garvin, BJ?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any other items for discussion on these minutes?
As written.
All those in favor?
Abstain.
Abstain.
And Mr. Kelsey and Ms. Reed abstain.
Chelsea Reed abstained. Okay, thank you.
Okay. March 24th
Got it.
minutes. Anybody care to make a motion for the March 24th minutes?
Move for
Discuss or
approval,
modify?
Andy. Yep.
Move for approval. That was Mr. Kelsey. And who do I have? Garvin with a second? Any adjustments or corrections?
As written. Thank you.
Hearing none? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No abstentions.
There are no abstentions. All regular members were there. All right,
Yeah, perfect.
let's move to the May 18th meeting, which was via Zoom following the annual town meeting on May 18th.
I have one small correction. I think it's a typo.
Uh-oh.
Third paragraph down, last line, should that be vote upon the draft budget? Where it says note upon the draft budget?
Oh, note upon the draft? You want that to be vote? Yeah, that's probably a typo. That should be vote. Thank you, Judy.
Welcome. That's all I had.
Okay, awesome.
So do I have a motion on these?
I'll move to accept the minutes.
Mr. Kelsey, second.
Anna.
Anna, thank you. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Okay. Thank you very
Awesome.
much.
Thank you.
All right, next item is Nicole, the financial reports.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. So if you look on, for May 2020, tax collections are at 99.71%. Although this is close to the 100% for budget, it really has slowed down the last couple months as expected, and we're a lot lower than we were last year at this time. At the end of May, there was about 100,000 still to be collected to hit the budget, and I'm hopeful that we'll get there. But usually our tax collector is well over her budget and hauls in a lot more, a couple 100,000 more than what we budget, and I don't think that will be the case this year. So as of May 31st, we still have $1.2 million to pull in total revenue. That includes the 800 from surplus, but in past years we haven't had to use that 800,000 in surplus, but I definitely think we're going to be using that this year in order to hit our revenue target. And a lot of it is just really the COVID-19, Park and Rec programs were canceled or curtailed in the spring. And just, I guess, the general economy because of it. So we'll really have to see come next month where we sit. So I will let you know about that. The good news is we did get Mile Creek Road Bridge grant funding of $543,700. For expenditures, one of the things that we've tried to do in the tax office, as well as I think every office, is try not to have people coming in to pay at town hall. Even when we open, we're gonna tell people that they can't come in. Please pay by mail. Please pay online. So in the tax office, we're actually this year we're gonna have a vendor do all of our mailing. It's gonna include a return envelope for people to pay, or it's also gonna have an insert of how to pay online. And then eventually hopefully in January, we're gonna move to a lockbox system. And what this is all payments go to a site that our bank does, and they record all the payments. They match up payments with coupons, and for everything that matches 100%, they run it through their system. They run it to a file. It gets sent to us, and we just upload that payment right to our tax system. So it's going to reduce the amount of hours we pay people. It's going to reduce the amount of time that people touch cash or checks. And so although I don't know our tax collectors too excited about it, I'm really excited about it. So hopefully it's going to help facilitate that office into a much more higher level of technology. So we'll see how that goes. Some of the things that have to do again with the COVID-19, Phil has put in a lot of extra hours helping Dave Roberge and getting our facilities ready. Some of that he has spiked out, some of that he hasn't, but he also has a lot of projects going on as well. So I expect his wages to be over for the year. We've also had a lot of unemployment claims, and you'd be surprised how many high school and college kids have filed for unemployment because of seasonal summer camps and programs. So nothing we can really do about that. We're hoping that the state doesn't approve some of them based on them being seasonal, but you know, our state system is pretty liberal, and most people that apply get unemployment despite what we think is not right or wrong. So to be determined. There's probably about half a dozen that have already been approved that we're paying on. Some are part-time people that we haven't had come into town hall to work, like in the tax office and that kind of thing. So some of them are, you know, are expected, but some of them are not. So I'll have to keep you updated on how that progresses with our budget.
Excuse me, Nicole, what does SD stand for? SD.
Report, special deductions. It's just a department.
Special deductions. Okay, thank you.
Okay. For COVID-19, year-to-date direct costs that we've paid is almost 26,000. That's as of May. As of today, there's probably another 10 grand that we've paid. So we're probably up to 35,000. Dave and Phil are really in charge of getting our facilities ready. So they're out there incurring a lot of expense that I don't know if Tim knows more than I do, but there's a lot more coming down the pike that I don't have the information for. So I'll just keep you up to date as best I can.
Nicole, this is BJ. What portion of that is reimbursable? I don't remember, but it seems to me the state rather than the federal government is reimbursing some or all of these costs.
No, the state actually did a webinar last week with all the finance people, and there's a pecking order of where you have to request your money for first. So the first line item, I don't have it with me, is obviously FEMA. FEMA will pay 75% of approved costs. Now, what is approved and what's not approved, I don't have the answer to that. You know, we might have 25,000 in expenses, but I don't know how much of that FEMA will approve. Dave Roberge really would answer that question. And then the pecking order, again, you go to your health district to see if they have any money that they could give the towns, and I've already contacted them and they've said no. So the next pot of money would be the state of Connecticut, the CARES Act, as they've called it. They will cover that 25% that FEMA doesn't cover. Or if there's other expenses that FEMA will not cover at all, that maybe the state will. So through June 30th, the state has approved giving us 31,000. And again, that 31,000 is, as far as I know, would cover that 25%. We have until the end of August to request that money from the state of Connecticut. I can't request that until Dave Roberge requests his 75%. I need an actual approval letter from FEMA. So Again, that's through June 30th. They haven't really talked about money from that point on, what we're gonna get, if anything. And I
Okay.
think those extensions will be pushed out. I have to wait on Dave and see what he gets approval for and what he doesn't.
The 31,000 is a maximum approved amount at this point, and then we have to justify the expenditures to enjoy some of it.
Right, so if currently we're at probably like 35,000 of costs for COVID-19. 75% of that hopefully will get reimbursed by FEMA. And the remaining 25% is what I would go to the state of Connecticut for, that 31,000. So,
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, it's a moving target, but hopefully the lion's share will be reimbursed by the state or the feds.
I'm hoping, in one of the literatures from the state of Connecticut, they mentioned they will only reimburse for costs that were not originally in your budget. So to me, a lot of the costs that we're paying for rangers and just kind of controlling the beaches down because of the 50% rule and all of that, I don't know how much of that will be covered. I mean, that stuff really is included in our budget to control the crowds and sound view and all of that. So I don't know how liberal they will be in interpreting what is in our budget and what is not. And what was unexpected and what was not. So, I guess it's to be determined. We'll see as it comes.
Nicole, when I was talking with Dave today, and he indicated that if we spend more than what was submitted, likely that would be covered. Now, I don't know if that number that you submitted is an absolute or not. He also said that certain labor or certain in-kind services count toward a total. So if, for instance, the volunteer ambulance people responded, their volunteer hours would be counted toward a total, whether it would be the 32 or 3,000 or maybe make that number a larger number. But he said in the past with hurricanes and so forth, that the in-kind services provided by the town have made a material difference. So it's new territory. We don't really know. So we'll hopefully find out pretty quickly.
Yep.
Any other questions for Nicole on the COVID?
It's just, Nicole, if we spend the money, then when it comes back, it goes into our undesignated fund balance, correct?
Correct.
And then there's also other legislation that's coming through that's been proposed because it's been approved by the House of Reps, but it goes to the Senate and then on to other approvals. But the initial run through, there's a site that you can go to. Old Lyme is listed to get 2.4 million in this proposal for this year, and then 1.2 million for relief acts for local communities. It's probably wishful thinking. That's just a proposal by the House of Representatives. But the issue here is that this is the first time that I've seen some support being reviewed directly for local communities, which is somewhat helpful. And 10 years ago with the recession, they did put in some ARRA funds to the local school districts to help during that time. We'll have to see what develops over the next few months.
Okay, good. Let's hope some of that does come back to Old Lyme. Other items?
Other items, again, I'll talk about the police. I think I've talked about in the past month or so, their budget is probably going to go over in total. There's been a lot of overtime. There's been a lot of ranger time, and even stuff that's not COVID related. hopefully, I'm hoping that our new resident trooper has taken a better control of the budget. You know, he kind of inherited what he has. So really next year will be his responsibility, but we might be, I'm almost positive we're going to be moving money at the end of the year to the police budget.
Okay.
We may again have money needed in the transfer station. I know usually contracted services always seems to get me at the end of the year. And I know it will again this year because the transfer station has seen so much activity with people being home. There's a ton of revenue. I mean, we must pull in like $4,000 a week just in collection fees. But again, our costs are going to increase as well. So again, that'll be another department that runs over.
Nicole, this is BJ. But I want to go back to the police overtime. It's been running, it seems to me, substantial numbers for the past 3 months. Do you have a handle on the reasons for that consistent overtime?
Well, before about for most of the year, we didn't have any part-time guys to fill in to cover shifts. So now, a couple months ago, we did hire 2 part-time guys, but we've seen a lot of patterns that, you know, I'm not too happy with. A lot of it, for instance, an officer has a lot of time that they have to use for vacation because they can only carry over at June 30th so much. So they want to use a vacation day. But on that same day, so someone has to, if that person's out off of that shift, someone has to cover that shift. So that either is going to be from a part-time officer or it's going to be from another officer with overtime. That officer that's been out on vacation for that is also during that same day working highway projects and then will come in at that night and do an overtime shift. So there's a big push for them to use vacation time, but yet on those same shifts they're doing it as well. So Tim had mentioned that in the contract negotiations, they're going to try to stop that from happening. Can't work other shifts on the day you're taking a vacation because really that's like a, you know, like a payout of unused vacation. So I don't know, Tim, if you want to comment on that or.
And I don't want to belabor it right now, but I gather from what you're saying is that both you and Tim are aware of and unhappy with the amount of overtime and are struggling to try to get it under control.
Yeah, it's tough. Like I said, without those part-timers all year, a lot of the guys didn't get to use their vacation and sick and personal time. And with the limit on how much they can carry over June 30th, I understand that they're accelerating and they want to, you know, not lose it, but it kind of causes our budget to get when they do that.
Nicole, is there some of it related to these, like down Soundview, there's a lot of OT for these road jobs and contractors and stuff. Some of this private duty where we derive income from it?
We will, yes. Yep.
Does that income more than compensate for the fact that we're paying them overtime?
Yeah, it should. Yeah.
But that private duty, the costs and the revenue are in a separate fund.
Okay.
So, but again, we have used that money to cover some of the new vehicles, or we had talked about getting them new uniforms and that kind of thing. So we've used that money in the past if we've had a budget need for it. Okay. So I don't want to say it's not at our disposal. So.
Okay.
And I guess the only thing I wanted just to say on the library, we've processed the 5th payment for a little over $300,000, and total to date we've paid them almost 1.6 of their total. So we're getting to the end on that.
Well, there again, the deal was the town would fund it along with the library. They did an initial $300,000, then the town took over. Once we get to 50%, the library would be eligible to draw down on the state grant of $1 million. They have gone, I think, 2 requisitions beyond the state, or the 50%. And so I've been trying to reach the director at the library to find out where the state grant is, because technically, once we hit 50%, then that money from the state kicks in, and then we come back, that $1 million has been expended, and we finish up. So I would like to see the library reimburse us for what we've advanced beyond 50% using the library money, the logistics of that, whether they get a lump sum or just what. But we have gone, I don't know, probably 15% beyond what we should have gone. And in the end, it's all going to come out properly, but it's the deal was the state money was supposed to come in at 50%.
I would assume what's going on with COVID and state employees that may or may not be working in the office or out of the office, I would think, I don't know, they may be having trouble getting a
I
hold
can
of
answer
people.
this.
Anna?
Yeah, I can
Great.
answer this because I'm the Board of Finance representative. I go to all the meetings. And yes, we requested that money in May and it did not come through before we had to request it from the town. And the library was they waited until June 3rd and then they requested it because we had to pay contractors. 2 days after that, they did get money from the state. So there will not be a request from the town this month. Now it's going to come out of the state funds, but it's just the same thing. They have to submit the money. It doesn't come in a lump sum. And because of everything going on with COVID, it's taking like weeks longer for them to process these payments and say yes. So we're hoping that because the project is almost done. So I think it's 90% done right now. So hopefully this won't happen again, but that was the reason behind it. They were 6 weeks behind in their paying of the grant, even though it was approved. We just didn't get the money. But they did get that payment. They got the exact amount that the town paid because that's what we requested from the state. So that money will go towards the next bill.
Glad to have that update and maybe have them communicate with Tim and Nicole.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So they're aware.
I think that I was told anyway that when they submitted that, they were going to let you guys know that because they were very concerned about it themselves.
Okay.
It's pretty recent, so yeah.
It was like last week.
Okay.
So.
Excellent. Well, it's good. It's all good then. Thank you.
That's all I had.
That's all. Anybody have any other questions for Nicole on the financials dated May 30? Thank you, Nicole. Under other business, I'm going to turn it over to Tim. This is an old subject that's coming that we've been aware of is the White Sands, the pump at the entrance to the town parking lot at White Sands Beach. That work was done last fall. Tim, why don't you take it from there?
Yeah, White Sand Beach has had a bad history of having to replace pumps. And Alan Achille, who is the president, thinks that they may have maybe doing a better job now because the old pumps were 1/2 horsepower pumps, and now they're using 1.5 horsepower, and they're possibly a different location as opposed to down in the manhole type of thing. So they have spent to replace the pumps and various service calls and so forth. I think it's $12,483. I have two numbers, 12,683 and 12,483. But adding up, I come to 483. So over the years, the White Sand Beach Association and the town have split the cost of the pump repair. The pumps pretty much pump the water out of the near the parking area there, and there's debate about where the water comes from, whether it's from the town beach or elsewhere. But the pattern has been that the town and the beach do 50-50. He reports that the the pumps are handling everything very nicely at the moment. So, but I think it's unfinished business that they would need to get reimbursed for half of the amount. So it'll be about $6,300, something like that.
Well, do we usually do half?
Yeah.
Yep.
So I guess if we allocated, say, 6,250, that would be very, very close to what the total is if you double it.
So would somebody care to make a motion for the town of Old Lyme to share, as we have in the past, in the replacement of the pumps, White Sands Beach, for up to $6,250?
I'll move that, Andy. Kelsey.
Thank you, David. Do I hear a second?
Controversial.
Do I hear a second from anybody?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Jude. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Tim, I'll go to you for Selectmen's report.
Very good. Good news, I guess, that the town hall will open for business with the public on June 22nd. It's the Monday, next Monday. We will be changing the way town hall works. We'll keep the front doors to the normal front doors closed, and we will be using the lobby doors to the meeting hall as the way to come into the building. We will have a greeter who will make sure that people coming in have a face mask or will be issued one, and they will ask where they're going and monitor how many people are going to what department. We'll have a walkie-talkie type thing to, if we start getting more than 2 or 3 people wanting to see a department, we'll have the extra people wait in the meeting hall until that line reduces. We are putting out a townwide communication about this, and we are saying we do not want any in-person tax payments, dog licenses, beach passes, or town hall filings. We want to minimize the amount of repetitive transactions and have people can put them in a lockbox through the door, mail, or do it online. So we'll see how it goes. We're redoing some of the interior of the building to include these hand sanitizer stations. We'll have plexiglass in front of the customer contact areas. A couple of our doors will be Dutch doors to keep people at the front of the office and not coming into the office. So we will open up on Monday and have some fun. Next is the beaches. As you may recall, the beaches were closed on the 2nd of May. They reopened on the 23rd. We gave a lot of thought to how they would reopen between emergency management and the police and so forth. We have 2 beaches really in Soundview that are town beaches, the end of Hartford Avenue and the end of Swan Avenue. We're using a formula to have up to 70 people on the Hartford Avenue beach and 30 people on Swan Avenue. In between, the restaurants have certain capacities as well. They, some time ago, were able to have outside dining, and they have been doing that. It's been working pretty well. Miami Beach, that is a great big beach, and we did a calculation. We figure that beach could accommodate about 635 people. However, because it is a private beach with this public access, we are putting the burden for monitoring the number of people on Miami Beach, on the Miami Beach officials. So we are helping at the gate. We relocated the entrance to Miami Beach from the end of Hartford Avenue to an alley on just to the east, just to the west of Portland Avenue, and people are directed to that entry point. We didn't want to have 500 or 600 people coming into Miami Beach at Hartford Avenue along with everything else there. So the Miami people are not happy with that, but it does spread out the crowd. So that's been doing pretty well. We have had at capacity, we have these lighted signs, one at the beach and one near Oak Ridge, so we can let people know. But once Rocky Neck fills up, we get the overflow, so that's a given. The governor's phase 2 was to be the 20th of June. It's now the 17th, tomorrow. That will allow indoor dining and short-term cottage rentals. I'm sure Mr. Garvin is pleased. So certain things are loosening up a little bit, but we'll be monitoring that, and certainly the restaurants will get a boost there. We've also worked with Park and Recreation. The rules for the parks, we will be allowing the parks to have more activity. We're going to be allowing tennis, and as far as some of these other sports such as baseball, soccer, lacrosse, we do not want contact sports, team sports, but if people want to pick a soccer ball around or do batting practice and so forth, that will be fine. We'll have, Park and Rec will periodically check to make sure. Oddly, the playgrounds, we got clearance from the health department to open the playgrounds with no specific sanitizing requirements. The rationale being that little kids are perhaps the most resilient for COVID. So it would be up to the mothers, of course, mothers and fathers, whether they would want their kids on the things, but they'll be available with hopefully social distancing. Rowing will resume at the boathouse on the 22nd. They will self-discipline the shells and the activities there, the Rowing Association. So we're hopeful that will work out well. Concerning tax increments, effective July 1, the town of Lower Lyme adopted a low interest rate program for delinquent taxes. If you are late on your payment during the quarter, July 1 to October 31, your interest after July would accrue at the rate of 3% a year instead of 18% a year. So that's 0.25% per month. So persons who are having trouble paying their taxes during that quarter would enjoy a benefit. If, however, a tax amount is unpaid as of 31 October and it goes beyond the grace period, the amount will retroactively be at 18%. So it's just for that 90-day period that will apply. Soundview, we're very busy with the Connecticut Water Company doing the water mains on Swan and Portland. They're installing 8-inch water mains at the top of those two streets. Because they had a work shutdown, they will be able to work until June 19th, south of 156. After June 19th, they will work on Soundview area, miscellaneous area B. I don't know why they make that dreadful name, but that's what it is. And then after Labor Day, they can return and do more, finish up the laterals for the water. It should be finished by the end of the year. The sewers, I think Rich gave a description about that, but we are working on the agreements legal between our attorney and the beaches attorneys. We're also working on an easement for the collection pipe to come across our streets and alley. And we've also negotiated with Frank Murata to be able to utilize his parking lot behind the pavilion to have the collection pipe come through there as opposed to having to go around that property. We approved an engineering contract with Woodward and Curran to work on the Soundview infrastructure and also to look over the shared asset activity as well. So that contract was signed for $612,000, which would be clean water funded. The Soundview sidewalks are to be installed ultimately on the north part of Hartford Avenue from Bocce Lane, which is near the Soundview Community Center, up to the Easy Mart at the top. And then as far as we can do sidewalks along 156 from Cross Lane heading east toward the police department. The BSC, our consultants, are pretty well set with the design for Hartford Avenue. There are some particular situations where properties along that stretch are actually quite low relative to the street. You know, water ponds back in their little front yards. So we've been spending time trying to figure out what to do about that. But there is about a 7-foot right-of-way between Hartford Avenue and the property line of the people who live there. So it can be that can be a sidewalk with a little extra strip installed there. And they're finishing up the design for the sidewalk on Route 156. There is a grant to construct the sidewalks at $400,000 from the state. That's 100% of whatever work can be done for that amount. And the engineering is funded at $40,000 by the grant as well. Mile Creek Road, the bridge over the Black Hall River, there's been a holdup on that starting. There are some electric wires that go by the bridge there that would be in the way of where the crane would need to lift the old section of bridge off the bridge and put the new sections on. So those wires have now been moved. So we think that this work will begin in earnest about before the end of the month. These bridge sections are going to be prefabricated up in Massachusetts and trucked down. Once the work begins, that road will be blocked off and people will have to detour. And we've sent out a communication about warning people about how they will get around that construction site.
Just real quick, once they start, about how long will the road be blocked off?
Probably a couple of months.
Okay. Well, hopefully they can get it done before school goes back and.
If school happens, yeah.
True.
Yeah.
Okay,
That's
thanks.
true. Yeah. The Grassy Hill Bridge, that'll be next year. There's a grant for that, a 50%er, just as there is for Mile Creek. We were informed by the state that we had to do an archaeological survey in the work site of the bridge at Grassy Hill because there may be artifacts in the soil. So we've engaged a company to do that, and hopefully that fee will be eligible for reimbursement as well. Haynes Park bathroom, I think we've heard about that enough. There There were about 8 interested builders who took packages. We will find out on July 1 who actually submits bids. The senior center expansion, as we know, Lyman O-Lime had committed $15,000 toward some study work to see what needs to be done, and the seniors have also earmarked $15,000 of their own, so that'll be $30,000. We've been encouraging them to do a lot of work with their existing membership, and then have the consultants use that information rather than have to spend money on that. But that timeline is very fuzzy at this point. And last, we have apparently 21 cases of COVID since the reporting started back in March. We do not have status reports on what happens to the early diagnosed people. There had been one death, but recently there was a second death reported, an 82-year-old male. I don't have much on that, but that was reported this in the last few days. So I don't know whether that person, doesn't look like that person had been previously diagnosed with the symptoms. So when you divide 21 into 7,500, it's a pretty small number, although 2 deaths are disturbing. However, I do think that if someone has a rather severe disease and dies and there's an element of COVID, they'll call it a COVID death and not what probably caused their death. So that's a brief update.
Tim,
For Tim.
BJ, let me ask, the town hall is going to open up this coming Monday. Will that opening include meeting rooms for boards, commissions, and private organizations?
I think crowds in a building are still limited to 10 people. The planning commission with 5 people and a secretary wanted to meet and use the speakerphone in there. They can do that. They have to, you obviously a regular town board, commission, or committee has to have it open to the public. So they would at the least have to have the public on the phone, available to be on the phone. So yeah, if you had meetings of 10 or less, that would be possible. I would say that during the day, if we're using that room for overflow, people going to departments, that might have an impact on it. But technically, a small group could meet in the building with masks.
Thanks.
And we're hoping by phase 3 that actually the Board of Finance, we can hopefully configure it so that we could safely meet in the meeting room. And as Tim said, have the public have access via WebEx or telephone. So it would be a public meeting, but that we might actually be able to meet. Just from a selfish point of view, hopefully get our Board of Finance back together and around the table. Maybe a bigger table, so there's 6 feet, and we'll wear masks and all that good stuff.
Yeah, the governor's phases have usually been around the 20th. So you may have to, I don't know whether you'll make it with the.
I'm gonna make it for July.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Tim? Okay. I'm open to, at this point, open up the microphones for public comment. Many of you are muted. I don't have a way that I'm aware of to unmute everybody. But I assume that you could probably unmute yourself. Is there anybody from the public that wishes to make a comment? I would like the comments to be brief and to a point. And I'd like you to identify yourself as you start to make your comments so we have that for the record. I'm not hearing anybody.
Dennis Maluzzo.
Hi, Dennis.
A couple of things. In Mr. Prendergast's rendition of the sewer project, he kind of poo-pooed the suing aspect of this. If us residents, I'm on Portland Avenue, bring this to court. What he's not telling you is the city of Stamford, the town of Ridgefield, and the city of Branford, or the town of Branford, tried to do exactly what they're doing and lost dearly in court. Cost the town money. They had to also pay their lawyers' fees. I would caution the Board of Finance as to the actual cost of this project, because there's been at least 3 estimates of benefit assessments going from my house was $54,000 last summer. Now it's down to $41,000. And they're talking about doing it another one. And tonight we find out that he's planning on doing this benefit assessment 6 months before the project ends. What he's not telling you is we've already expended almost $2 million of that clean water fund for testing, consultants, and lawyers. So all of those go on the backs of the Southview residents. And if you lose in court, it goes on the back of the entire town. The other thing I wanted to mention was he equated Point of Woods sewer project, which was about 10 years ago. What he's not telling you is Point of Woods had to blast, put in water lines, and put in sewer lines. Soundview has no ledge. It was all farmland. It's sand, gravel, and peat. There's no blasting. There's nothing. The town of East Lyme only charges their customers who want to hook up to water $5,000. No connection fee. It's a flat $5,000 for anybody who wants to hook up, regardless of the size of your house. Please watch the money and where it's going. Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. Anybody else?
Hi, this is Rich Prendergast. I'd like to make a comment.
Okay.
We're trying to make the sewer projects as inexpensive as possible. Our additional adjustments in the benefit assessment are not increasing the costs. They are trying to reduce the costs. And going from 54,000 to 41,000, I would think people would appreciate that. I'm going to try and get it even lower if we can. There are lawsuits against other towns where those towns didn't do their research. We're doing our research. There is some exposure if someone sues, because you can't stop someone from suing. We're trying to take all that into consideration. And you can probably figure out for yourself what kind of risk there is. We've included in that in our long-term planning. So the statement about $2 million from clean water funds has been spent. Not in this town. I haven't spent $2 million, and WPCA hasn't spent $2 million. And all that planning funding is not part of what goes on to the Soundview residents. It's the sewer project goes on to the Soundview residents. I just want to clarify that. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Any other public comment?
Yes, Frank Papalardo.
Go ahead, Frank.
Yeah, I'd like to just to follow up on what Dennis did say. I think that the issue here is not that the residents of Soundview do not want to pay anything. It's a matter of what their share happens to be. And the methodology that the WPCA is putting forth is that the entire amount of the cost of the project will be divided up amongst the users, regardless of what the benefit happens to be. And once again, as Dennis said earlier, I think that the Board of Finance needs to be cautious as to the potential and the high likelihood that the town of Old Lyme will be held responsible for a portion of the sewer project. There is a multiple case law all the way up to the appellate and Supreme Court that has supported our position, and I think that we need to look forward to that. And as Dave Kelsey alluded to earlier in the meeting, it would be a good idea to have this conversation now rather than 3 months before or 6 months before the project is done, and then all of a sudden pop on the citizens of Old Lyme, oh, by the way, we're responsible for X millions of dollars of this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. Any other public comment? Okay. Not hearing any. I would entertain a motion to adjourn. One of the board members, perhaps unmute yourself and make that motion.
I make a motion that we adjourn at 9:23.
Thanks, Jude. Do I hear a second?
I'll second, Susanna Ryder.
Thank you very much. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much, all. Everybody have a good night. Thanks for your participation, everybody.
And we're done.